Okay, baby. Let me just, I'll call it, or I'll be there in a minute, okay?
Do at the Lee County Bar. If you look on our website and you look at our mission statement, it states that the purpose of the organization is to further the education of its members, to create meaningful interaction among its members, and to inform the community of important legal matters. And frankly, I can't think of maybe a more pressing time or a more important time to create meaningful interaction, not just amongst our Lee County Bar members and our legal community, but within the community at large and those who are here and all the stakeholders within our community. When I began or I was beginning to transition into the presidency of the Lee County Bar, of course, we always want to further that mission statement and further those objections. But one of the things I really wanted to emphasize was being able to address and being able to talk about significant issues, whether legal, regulatory, otherwise, but significant issues that really play into the everyday lives, not just of lawyers, judges, our legal community, but our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues. While our meetings have not, of course, been in person every time this year and every month, we've not been able to gather in person for obvious reasons. I'm incredibly proud of what we've done so far this year in addressing some of these issues that affect our state and our communities, it being the hemp economy and agriculture in the state of Florida. We've talked about red flag laws and the Second Amendment. We've had great articles and great discussions on voting rights, the restoration of felon voting rights under Amendment 4, especially the importance of that coming up in this year's election cycle. But I certainly never imagined, and I would certainly never have hoped to come together under this kind of circumstance and under these tragic events. But if I take away one thing from this, one silver lining, it's the positivity in knowing that the Lee County Bar can provide a forum for this kind of discussion. We've also been extremely vigilant and taken a lot of pride in having a open and what I'll call a apolitical forum for discussion, where we do not push agendas, we do not push talking points. What we have are open and candid discussions amongst each other, and a open mind and respect for those when we have those discussions. I've said many times we have a serious vacuum or maybe even a lack of venues where you can discuss issues that affect you, that may be controversial or that may be hot button issues. So what you end up with is those who will go to their partisan organizations, whatever side of the political spectrum you fall on, and you really don't get a full broad spectrum discussion about the issues. But today I'm really excited that we could all be here and set those things aside to really be able to listen to one another, discuss these issues, and have the personal experiences shared, which are going to be many and diverse today, which I'm excited about hearing. One of the last few things I want to say is that generally when we have a presentation like this, or we have a member meeting, we usually have a central theme or a central focus to anchor our discussion. And when we were sitting down, and I was talking to Kelly a little bit and some of the community members, when we were looking at what we were going to focus on, we came to the realization it kind of was impossible to condense this discussion into one headline or one talking point or one title. And that's okay. We came to the realization it's actually natural and it's appropriate and it's okay, because everybody does come into this conversation with a different perspective and with a different viewpoint. And that's to be celebrated. Everybody has come to this moment today with their own personal experiences in their own lives. They see things differently because they've experienced different things throughout their lives. And that's something we want to highlight and we want to celebrate. So when I listen and when we all listen to our speakers today, one of the things I would I'm going to focus on, and I would encourage others to do, is to really listen and appreciate the personal experiences of our speakers, and then reflect back on your own life and your own experiences and how you can compare those to say, when I'm interacting with somebody or I'm having a discussion with somebody, how can I appreciate what they've gone through and understand what they've gone through in order to live my life and to interact in a peaceful and civil manner to live in the world that we all want to be a part of. So I would encourage others to join with me in doing that today, and really excited to hear the information and the experiences that are going to be shared today. We've got an incredible panel of speakers that I'm so happy are with us today and have taken the time to be here with us. The committee's done an incredible job of putting this lineup together. First, we've got Chief Derek Diggs. He's got 40 years plus of law enforcement experience. Came to us as Chief of Police, and he's a dedicated public servant, and he's going to be speaking to us today. Thank you for joining us, Chief Diggs. Next is Malcolm Godwin. Malcolm's at the State Attorney's Office here locally in our 20th Judicial Circuit, fantastic prosecutor. He's also the president of the Isaac Anderson Jr. Bar Association. Thank you for being here, Malcolm. Next is a good friend of mine I've known for a long time, Peter Dennis. Peter is a criminal defense attorney here locally who frankly has an amazing story, and I hope he has time to share some of that with us today, being the son of a tribal chief in West Africa, seeing firsthand the tragic experiences of civil war in Liberia and traveling back and forth between Liberia and the United States. Peter's done amazing work here in Lee County locally. He's been published in the Florida Bar. He's been published by the Washington Post, and he's also served as local counsel for the Equal Justice Initiative. So thank you for being here, Peter. Next is Kinfei Marodi. I think most of us here know and are familiar with Kinfei's fantastic work. He's a journalist with over 20 years of experience. He's been published by every big publication you can think of: Time Magazine, the New York Times, USA Today, NPR. He was also with the News Press from 2005 to 2019, and we're very honored. He's a United States Air Force veteran, so thank you for your service and thank you for being here, Kinfei. Lastly, we've got someone who's really fantastic and brings a wealth of experience and knowledge on these subjects, and done a lot of research and study on a lot of these studies. Sandra Pavelka is a professor and founding director of the Institute for Youth and Justice Studies here locally at FGCU. She's the president and CEO of Community and Restorative Justice Associates. She's the chair of the 20th Circuit Juvenile Justice Advisory Board. She is active in more organizations here locally, giving back than I could list, but would take up the entire time here today, which I don't want to do. But needless to say, she's got an extremely impressive resume, and we're so excited to have her here with us. And leading our discussion today is going to be Adrianette Williams. She's an assistant with the Regional Counsel Office. She is the founder and president of Networking Consulting, LLC, and former assistant director for Henry T. Latimer Center for Professionalism with the Florida Bar. She's going to lead the discussion today. I want to thank everybody one more time for being here. I hope everybody enjoys this experience. While it may be tough and some subjects may be uncomfortable, I know these are how we grow as a community, by furthering these discussions and appreciating where we all come from and our own experiences in our lives. So with that, Adrianette, please lead us in the discussion, and thank you all.
Thank you, Sir President. First of all, thank you guys for having this meeting today. And this is not my first time in Lee County, but I was honored to be called upon to moderate the conversation today, because this has been my favorite thing to do for years, is to have these tough conversations that we have to have as a collective unit to move forward to something else. And my favorite thing is, I don't just like to talk, I like, hopefully, from this experience what we will gather, we can move forward in some sort of steps of action based on this conversation. But first, before we get there, as we've said before, we're hoping to have a very respectful conversation, and I some ways that we can do that and I think I've talked about this before, whenever you have some sort of conversations like this, you have to come to the table understanding that you may not like what everybody has to say, because the point of views are vast in this room today, in our Zoom today. And with that being said, you may not like what everybody has to say, and that's okay. You don't have to agree with everybody today. It's okay. But what happens is when you get to listen to another point of view, especially that's different from your own, hopefully we move from these polarized views to just a little closer to seeing each other's point of view. And with that being said, as we move forward, we're doing this, and we're hoping that this discussion today does not carry outside of Zoom to personal attacks or anything like that. So whatever is said in this group or whatever is said on the Zoom, I ask that we take it and leave it here, but only move forward with the actionable steps, not to bash anyone, because this is a opportunity to learn. I ask that we approach this with authenticity. And the beautiful thing about everybody in this room is we have one thing in common, is that we believe in justice, and that's why we're here. What justice looks like to each of us may be different, and we'll get to hear about that today. So we remember, we all start on one common ground, and we all want one common goal in the end. And how we get there is just what we are discussing today. And other than that, without further ado, I'm going to move forward with our Chief of Police, Chief Diggs, who I have heard does not do too many interviews. So it's an honor to have him here with us today. Chief Diggs, I cannot see you, but feel free. I'm going to go ahead and let you make the opening statements and start this discussion today.
Okay, how long do I have for the opening statement?
Ooh, that's always, you know what, Chief? Let's see, what time is it now?
Why?
Take your time. If we need to, I can pop in if that's okay with you. Because I heard I may have to pop in. Is that okay, Chief?
You can do whatever you want. I'll keep it short.
I want that in writing. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I want to start off by saying that the actions that's leading to some of the unrest around this country is very, very shocking and very tragic. Personally, I don't know what those officers in Minneapolis was thinking. And I don't want to focus too much on that because of the fact that it was totally inappropriate. I've been in this business for almost 42 years. And their actions and behavior basically has no place in police work. And as I said to the media several weeks ago, as an agency, as a police chief, I'm empathetic to the recent events that are occurring up there as well as across the country, but also have to emphasize the fact that we here in the city of Fort Myers Police Department, we do not practice the actions or inactions displayed by those other police departments. And I kind of want to focus on some of the things that we do here, because if you listen to the media, at least they've been bombarding my office, bombarding my staff, and it's one question and one question only. What are you guys going to do to reform the police department? What are you doing to reform how you police in the city of Fort Myers? And I have to kind of remind folks of one thing. We've been reforming how we police this police department since August 16th of 2016. Since the very first day that I took the oath of office and took command of this police department. We had to do it on 3 different prongs. First of all, everyone knew that the city had a violence problem and a crime problem that we had to address. In addition, we had a problem with relationships in the community, police-community relations. And then thirdly, we had a professional group of consultants that was just starting to do what we would call a needs assessments and analysis. That after so many months did research and produced a report in February of 2017, a 72 page report that lists 32 recommendations that the police department had to accomplish in order to be able to be a reformed police agency. I'm happy to say that within the first year of me being the police chief, a little bit over 92 to 96% of those recommendations were accomplished. As of probably another year ago, 7 additional recommendations were placed on us by the free group. And to this day, we got about 98 to 99% of all those recommendations that were accomplished. So that's police reform. In addition, we had to deal with the violence. And we started out doing various initiatives to deal with the group and gang-related violence in this community. The results of that work gave us 4 straight years of overall violent crime reduction in this city. In addition to that, the third prong was police community relations. And as we started to police this community in various manners, we started a very comprehensive community engagement process. And I can get into various things about that, but some of the things we did, we started working with the juveniles. We expanded our police athletic league. Our police athletic league now has almost 400 kids from the community that we work with in various types of athletics and programs, provide the structure that these kids need so that they can stay in school and have the discipline. And we use athletics as the hook to do that. We have police officers in every one of our schools, every one. Never in the history of the city of Fort Myers has there been a police officer in every city school in the city. We have those officers there not to be security guards. We don't have those officers there to protect against a school shooting, although they are trained to do that. They are trained to work with the kids, and they're there to be part of the faculty and to once again, as police officers, to work on the things to keep these kids in a structured environment, to help them, to break down the barriers, and once again, have these kids become productive individuals in our community. Additional reform that we have done on the police department is training. We train annually on things like fair and impartial policing, implicit bias, racial sensitivity. How do you police in communities of color? Our training budget has went up approximately 300% since I become the chief of police. We consider ourselves a police department that's data-driven and evidence-based. What do I mean by data-driven, evidence-based? That means that we utilize data to determine what's the best way to deploy our officers, where we need to deploy them, so that we can have an impact on crime. What do I mean when we say evidence-based? The initiatives that we utilize have been tested, have been researched through various professional experts, subject matter experts, and college professors. We have relationships with applied 5 different research universities that assist us in how we police this community. Technology. We utilize technology to help collect the data. You see us with all our officers with body cameras. You see our police cars have dash cams. We have security cameras, surveillance cameras in various neighborhoods, not only just downtown, but some of the neighborhoods where we know there's a lot of crime and disorder, and a host of other things. We utilize that technology so that we can utilize our limited personnel and maximize them where they're definitely needed the most. Additional community engagement activities in the future, ones I'm very, very excited about, is something we can call our street law program. One of the things we found out is that many folks don't understand what the law is all about. They don't understand their role in public safety. So in the near future, we're going to put a 2-day training seminar for community members And ironically, it's going to be around use of force issues. And at the culmination of that training, we're going to have what you legal people call a mock trial. And we're going to have community members taking the role of police officers, prosecutors, witnesses, jury. We won't have a community member be a judge. We're going to reach out to someone that has legal experience to do that. But the whole idea is to first give the community members a basic understanding on what the law is regarding use of force, and then have a mock trial to understand how use of force cases are handled. We're very excited about that. Diversity. I strongly believe that a police department has to reflect the community that it serves. And it needs to do that because of trust. One of the things we have done since I've become the police chief is collaborate with the Lee County School Board. And currently we have a program working with the students, senior students at East Lee Community High School, East Lee County High School. We call that initiative our Pathways to Policing initiative. And what the idea is, we're taking their senior criminal justice students. And if they're interested in pursuing a field in policing, their senior year, we work with the staff out there and assist teaching courses. And when they graduate, we do everything we can. We love them, we hug them, we nurture them. We set up certain type of training situations. We try to hire them in internships, police cadet program, police explorer program, and we do everything we need to do to nurture them till they become 21. When they become 21 years of age, I sponsor those who want to go to police academy, and we put them in the police academy. And when they graduate, they become Fort Myers police officers, and I send them right back to that school, right back to those students that they were students with 2 or 3 years earlier, and let those students know that, hey, listen, this is what can happen to you if you want to be a police officer for the city of Fort Myers. What does that do? That helps me have my own Sow to See program. Kids who were born and raised in the city of Fort Myers become police officers in the city of Fort Myers. Why is that so important? It's all about trust. So I can talk about a lot of different things as far as what we're doing, and I don't want to get too wordy here because I want other people to talk and be able to answer things. But the point is this: I've looked at the various House bills that's being proposed in the various congressional sessions and their recommendations. Some of them are very good. Some of them are going to be very challenging to implement. Some of them just ain't going to happen. But the bottom line is this: I don't think you're going to find any recommendations that talks about positive police reform that we're not already doing. Whether it's the states to 8 or anything like that, we're doing it all. And we've been doing it for 4 years. So in the answer to my original question, Chief Diggs, what are you doing to reform the Fort Myers Police Department? Our police department has been reforming for the last 4 years. And at that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Williams and take it from there.
Chief, thank you so much. I have a couple questions for you before we move forward. Is that okay with you?
You're the boss.
Okay, so I was going to ask you about investigation of misconduct. Who investigates misconduct, and is that internal, or do you have an external group of people? How is that done?
All our misconduct complaints are investigated by our internal affairs section.
Okay, so, okay. And the reason I ask that question is because there have a lot of questions I've been getting are, how can, when someone is accused of doing something wrong, they get the opportunity to investigate themselves and find that they have done something wrong or right? Why are individuals who've been accused of doing something wrong the ones who get to investigate themselves?
Well, first of all, they don't get to investigate themselves. The staff of the internal affairs section are staff separate from those officers that are getting in trouble. Those officers report to the chief of police. They report directly to me. Every one of those investigations are investigated independently and reviewed by me before final discipline is initiated. If you recall, over the last several months, we hired a separate individual called the Inspector General. And the reason the Inspector General was brought onto my executive staff is to be that independent voice to review all disciplinary actions to make sure that discipline is issued fairly, firmly, and appropriately.
Okay. And why not have an external group of individuals who are not attached, not compensated by the police department, who review any allegations of misconduct?
Because first of all, it's illegal. Second of all, it violates the police officer's Bill of Rights, and it also violates, it's against state law.
Thank you.
You have, when it comes to criminal conduct, you have the state attorney's office, you have the U.S. attorney's office, that if there's any type of criminal conduct when it comes to misconduct, if they feel that the investigation wasn't conducted in an appropriate manner, they have a right to convene a grand jury on their own. They don't have to have permission from the police department.
Okay.
They can do that on their own. So you have that independence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, thank you, Chief. And the reason I asked that question is because my background is in professionalism, and I do know cities and counties around the state of Florida who have that. So that's why I was asking that question. But thank you so much for your insight. And the last question I was going to ask you, I think I'll save it for the end because I have some more I want to gather from you. So thank you. But as we move forward, Mr. Ken Fay, are you here? How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and segue into our discussion. So what I want to first talk about, and let me see here. Why do I don't have my question and answers for you, but I already know what I want to ask you. So what I have been told about you and what everybody should know is that you have covered every protest, correct? In the city of in Lee County, in Lee County, you've covered every protest.
Correct.
Okay, so before we move forward, can you just tell us your why as to what made you start doing this? And then I want to follow up with the question, what have you learned and what have you gotten out of capturing these images?
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm kind of excited, and I'm looking forward to learning from people like Chief Diggs and the other guests here in the forum. Why am I covering the protests? I've been a journalist for 20 years. And so when history is unfolding before you, and if you are journalists, like a lot of people are, it would be negligent to not be out there and capture moments. And that's what I've been trying to do as I'm out there in the protests, is to capture the moments neutrally, just as they are, as unbiased as I possibly can. So that's why I think I'm doing it, because it's history unfolding, and I like to try to, be a drafter of that if I could.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. You are a part of history right now moving forward. And I think everybody on this Zoom call understands that there is something happening right now in the state of America that is shifting people and causing people to move from just concern to really action, to wanting to see things differently. Can we all agree with that? Because I think that's why we're here. And so and I think part of that is because of social media and the images that are allowing the world to see what's happening. So you said you've covered every protest, and we would say, how many protests has that been?
There have been approximately between 14 to 15 protests in Lee County. There have been approximately maybe that same number in Collier County. So I've had a chance to be at the ones in Lee County, but then also capture the moments that are happening down in Collier County as well.
Okay. And so what is one of the biggest misconceptions about the protesters and what's going on with protests?
If you want to address it as a misconception, I think what I hear a lot from people that may not be able to be out in the protest is that these protesters are acting out of anger, and that they are, angry, and they are 100% anger driven. And while I think there is an element of angst involved there and there is some anger, I think one thing that is very, very prominent that may not get as much attention is it's frustration. Once these protesters are out there, their anger might put them out there at that rally or at that courthouse or out in front of, you know, the Fort Myers Police Department. But when they get there and you hear them talk, they start to unpack frustration and the question of why are you doing this to our community comes up, and why is born out of frustration. So I think that's one thing that a lot of people can see that may not be presented as easily. Anger is real easy to show. Frustration is like chess. You have to really listen and pay attention. And a lot of the protesters are expressing deep frustration, and that's evidence with questioning that they have.
Thank you. And so when we talk about these protesters and the feelings, what are the demographics of these individuals that you've been capturing?
Okay, so that's you know, that's pretty interesting. Here in Southwest Florida, the protests that I've captured in Lee County and even the ones down in Collier County, the demographic is skewing really young, let's say 30 and below. Now, in some of the smaller protests, like the Sunday protests, these lighter protests that happen in Centennial Park that may be faith-driven, then that demographic might skew up. You start to get some elderly senior citizens out there. But one thing that's I've noticed, and my pictures bear this out, the Facebook Lives that I capture, they bear it out, the racial demographic might be 60% non-minority at a lot of these protests. And it's not as though, you know, the white people that are coming are trying to co-opt the protest in any way. It's just that from what I'm hearing, they are moved to do something. And in the absence of having another thing to give their energies to, they too want to go out there and be present in these protests. So I would say, as an overall, the protests are skewing younger, except for those Sunday, you know, faith-based ones, a little bit older people. And then the demographic is, the racial demographic is, I would probably say, you know, 60 to 65% non-minorities involved.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Have any of those protests, and we all know, we see it on the news, and I'm a communications major, you can't trust what you see in the lens. So what is actually going on out there? Is there violence going on out there? What is actually going on? Because you've been to all of the protests, so tell us.
I think I have not witnessed any violent interaction between police officers, whether it be at the Fort Myers Police Department, Lee County Sheriff's Office, or the Collier County Sheriff's Office. I have not seen any dust up or fisticuffs come to fruition between the protesters and these officers. Now, have I seen angst? Have I seen water bottles thrown at Collier County Sheriff's officers from afar? Yes, I have. Have I seen people get right up into police officers' face and scream and vent and show their aggression through, through cursing at them? I sure have. Have I seen a Collier County Sheriff's officer use his shield a little bit to push and move the crowd along? Yes, but it's more as a buffer, not with any great force. So I haven't seen any, violent interaction or harshness between the two, aside from, extreme venting of their feelings to the officers. And I would like to note, it's more prevalent in the Fort Myers protests. The protests that take place, there is a Fort Myers Police Department presence, but that presence is not it's not a spying presence. It's not a circling presence. We're watching you to see what you're doing. A lot of times they are there to protect the protesters from whether it be, traffic that's gone awry, or like in one case downtown, there were a group of individuals that, had the Confederate flag, and they were driving their trucks around the protesters, and the Fort Myers Police Department's, officers would come in and kind of, break that up. So at least for the Fort Myers Police Department, when I've seen them interact with protesters, I haven't seen any negative encounters whatsoever. There was one Sunday where 3 police officers joined in a small march from Clemente Park to the Fort Myers Police Department. Now, they didn't chant, they didn't, they didn't raise their fists, they didn't scream George Floyd's name. And when I interviewed each one of them as they marched, I asked them, why did you jump in? Was this a police directive? Did Diggs, kind of push you out the door? They were like, no, this is a personal decision that we wanted to be a part of, and we are made to feel as though that we can, be a part of that. So, I think that the police presence has been pretty neutral. I wouldn't say they're cheerleaders, and I wouldn't say that they are going against the protesters. I think they're doing their best to be patient and show some restraint.
Thank you. And I appreciate both sides of, and Chief Diggs, I know I dig and I ask a lot of questions. That is because of 2 things that I want. I'd be remiss if I said this. My father was a warden over a prison. My mom is a police officer with the city and in the military. So I do come from a background, and one thing that we always worry about is, my mom was on the SWAT team. I just hope she made it home safe, and so I do understand both sides of what happens when both sides are concerned. And so I did want to share that with you guys. And the other thing that actually came to that was just crazy that happened is when the murder of George Floyd happened. I think it was Ahmaud Arbery that kind of shifted me. And I shared this with my boss. I shared this with Eda. I share this with anybody. When I saw that young man get shot and gunned down, from the truck, it literally, it took me out of my body for a second. It shook my spirit. It's the only way I can describe it. And so with the, when George Floyd died, that was kind of it really took me down a notch with the alleged murder of George Floyd. And so one of the things I did is I called my boss, and I'm lucky that I have a job where I can say, hey, this is really bothering me. And not to really question where she stood on it, but literally had a mental check-in with my boss because it bothered me so bad. And one of the things I got from it is because I've been speaking out bias and discrimination for years, is that I can use my platform. Well, in this position, in my platform, I was called by Benjamin Crump and his team and his law firm out of Tallahassee, Florida, to fly out and assist with George Floyd's funeral. So I actually got a firsthand view of the funeral. I was there for the whole week. I was there, I dealt with the media, and I dealt with the memorial. And what I can share with you guys is that it wasn't just people who looked like me who were there. It was people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, everybody has been affected. And I'm telling you, it is something different that's going on now. And I appreciate you for capturing these images to send to the world and being able to be out there consistently to give a report back. And hopefully this will be helpful.
I have one thing I wanted to mention. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I'll be done, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. Many of us are part of these communities, that we are covering. And one theme that I'm constantly hearing is community policing. Mm-hmm. Whether I'm in Collier County or whether I'm in Lee County, is the quiet conversations that go beyond the say their name chants. Or I wish police lived in my neighborhood where they are policing. You see, they mentioned that in other neighborhoods, those neighborhoods have the benefit of having a police officer drive their police car in that neighborhood, and that serves as a deterrent for crime possibly in that neighborhood. From the Dunbar community, from Suncoast Trailer Park, or even, you know, down in Immokalee, or even in River Park down in Naples, these predominantly minority communities, some of the leaders are saying it would be great if the community policing goes beyond having police officers just assigned to that community for the day or for a shift, but is there some way to further entrench these community police officers in these communities? That way they get to know the individuals that are in the community, and that way they can expand their police training with intimate knowledge of the community. So if they encounter an individual, they may have a previous relationship with them. They may know, okay, let Ken Fay go ahead and vent. He'll be cool in 2 minutes. I'm just gonna sit back and take a couple of deep breaths and then I'm okay. Not that the Fort Myers Police Department or police departments aren't trying to do that now, but that is one thing that I'm hearing a lot more now. If you are going to police us, try and further entrench yourselves in our community before these situations arise. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a beautiful segue. Thank you so much. Please stay, don't go anywhere.
I'm not.
Okay. As we segue, we're going to go right into Mr. Malcolm Godwin, who is the president, the sitting president of the Isaac Anderson Jr. Bar Association. So thank you for being on here with us today. And you're an attorney as well, Mr. Godwin, correct? You're on mute.
Okay, I'm not muted, right? Okay.
You're not muted.
Yeah, I work for the state attorney's office here. I've been here for about 5.5 years now.
Okay.
When I first started at the state attorney's office, I would probably call that the weirdest time for me. And what I didn't expect when I started is how I would respond to interacting with law enforcement. I was unaware that mentally I may have had trauma in my head and just had pushed it away. So I started working there. And everything's great. Everyone is super helpful. Everyone's very friendly there. I literally picked the 20th Circuit out of all the places I had been through Florida, just because I understood that by going there, after speaking with Amira Fox and Randy McGrother, I was convinced that they were the type of people I wanted to learn from to do this job right, to do justice right. So I started here, and what I didn't realize is that every time I saw an officer, I would tense up. I would start, breathing heavier, or my heart started beating faster. And I didn't realize that, after the day was over, I just go home and go right to sleep because I was so tired for being tense for so long. You're around them and nothing's happening. Like they're just, maybe walking through the office, or you see a bailiff, like any of those things at that time caused me to tense up. And I would say probably for 6 months to a year, and I didn't realize I was gonna have such a reaction. I think when people see George Floyd, and when they see incidents like that happening, and then they see the reaction of the protests that Kim Fay has recorded and went through. And when you see those small kids that are protesting and things, the one thing I want people to think is they shouldn't have to do that, right? A 5 and 6 year old shouldn't have to carry a poster that said, "My lives matter," right? And what happens is that 5 and 6 year old grows up, and then in their ordinary life, when they get their first, big girl, big guy job, and now they're hit with emotional things that they have never felt before. And so it literally took probably 6 months to a year before I felt comfortable and I wasn't tense when I came to work.
I want to follow up on that. So what shifted? What was the shift? What was the shift for you? What changed?
It's twofold. I think one, I went home, I think for Thanksgiving, almost a full year after I had been there. I go home for Thanksgiving. I go home for Thanksgiving, and I'm talking to my aunt and I'm talking to my grandmother about kind of how I feel about it. And what, I didn't realize is that their age and their place in history, right? They're explaining to me, well, yeah, I remember integrating into the same high school you went to and all the news is around and, the police not wanting us to be there. I'm like, that's my aunt. Like anyone that's on the Zoom call, imagine, Aunt Kathy telling you about how she got beat by police, right? And, my grandmother explaining, the civil rights movement through her eyes. And she was 20, 25 years old. I'm like, oh, okay. For one, it put it in perspective for me, how I should look at things. And two, I think just meeting, and this sounds cliche, but just meeting officers because of the job, you meet a lot of law enforcement from different backgrounds everywhere. Just meeting a lot of law enforcement that I actually liked, that I actually was like, oh, I like that guy, right? Or happy to see them, right? Like I can think the very first one was, I think his name, James Carson, the CCPD. And then Yari Sanders, the Fort Myers Police Department. I vividly remember them, Gabriel Rose from LCSO. I vividly remember those guys as being someone that for the first time I was like, oh, I'm not that tense around these 2 or 3 people, right? And then it kind of settled from there where I continued to mature into the job. But those 2 things I think were the biggest pillars. One, having it put in perspective to your own family members that you've known your entire life and how, what their history with law enforcement is. And 2, meeting law enforcement that really meant well. Sometimes like Chief Diggs said about, seeing body cameras and then you see some stuff that really happened that's crazy and you see them not react in an angry way. And I'm like, oh, that can happen, right? And you see so much of that. But I think without those 2 things, without having those good officers that I actually connected with, I'm not sure if I would be as comfortable as I am now.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think you hit on to something. And I think we may carry this through to the end. This may be a theme. You said, I was happy to see them. What if we had a world where we were all happy to see the police officers? Because that would mean they served a totally different role. Right. But I think that's an awesome point of view. I thank you also for your professionalism, because we know in any area of the law, for you to be able to move forward and to compartmentalize it, but not just compartmentalize it, deal with it in a professional way, to use your perspectives to help your career and help the people that you are called to serve is commendable. So thank you. Let me see. Did you want to discuss your past experiences with police and how that affected you?
Oh yeah. So
you guys want to hear? Wait, I'll make sure everybody's awake. Do you guys want to hear? Let me just see you raise your hands. Make sure you guys are awake. Okay, I see Julie, I see Lisa, I see Janice, I see Vicky. Okay, I see Mary Beth. Okay, Sonia. Let's see who else is raising their hand. They want to see Christopher. Okay, Cedric. Hi. All right. Okay. I just want to make sure they were here with us before.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
There's been multiple, right? Most of them I would say occurred when I was in law school in Winston-Salem. I think it's clear I'm a large Black dude with dreads. I don't look like 90% of the law students at Wake Forest, okay? So we used to have this long road that you had to take if you wanted to take the bus to get to your car. And at night, of course, you're in law school, you're studying for really long amounts of time. And so it'll be 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And I can think of 2 instances in which I'm trying to walk to the bus station and I'm getting confused, for individuals that they may have been looking for. And that 10:30 stop at the library, right? Or trying to get home from the library now becomes 12:30, now becomes 1 o'clock because I'm sitting on the sidewalk or, I've been put on the ground because I think one time there was a incident that happened like 2.5 miles away. And then it was no questions. It was just a come up, detain, lay on the ground, guns pointed. no questions, right? And so this is hour and a half of me sitting there basically looking at a gun while they try to figure out that, hey, I'm not that guy, right? There's been plenty of, you know, traffic stops. I remember when I was really young, like 19 or 20, my window couldn't be put down with the power door. So I actually had put the window up and taped it up, right? The struggles of college life. And at some point, if I got pulled over, which was relatively a good bit of time, I would have to push the door open. Otherwise, they would just be talking at the window. And one of those times I was in Monticello, Tallahassee. Yeah, it's Monticello, basically right outside of Tallahassee. And I got pulled over, and I remember, you know, cracking the door open for him. And immediately, you know, he starts screaming, "Don't get out of the car," pulls the gun. He walks up the entire time holding the gun. And that was the very first time in which I felt like I was being, you know, I was kind of held at gunpoint. I mean, there's no other way to kind of describe that, right? Or to describe that feeling. And, you know, through time, that happened a couple of times. So going from those instances that I continue to have to my job, it was a tough transition because of that.
Do you think it's made you, how do you think it's improved you as an attorney based on your experiences that you've had?
I don't know. I don't know if any of those experiences has improved me. I think Will Smith has a great quote where he says, "Childhood trauma doesn't create adult talent," or something like that. Any of those things improve me. If anything, I think they kind of slowed me down at the beginning, right? But it does give me perspective. I have a perspective as a prosecutor of every single defendant that comes in. It doesn't matter who they are. I remember being in those situations up through the arrest, right? And so maybe particularly my job as a criminal attorney, it helps me with the perspective of what they're going through and understanding what they're going through, and try not to abuse that power.
Well, that's a very powerful thing to have as perspective. Thank you, President Godwin. And I'll tell you, I have a circle of friends, and one of them is a state prosecutor in Georgia. And I call her and I say, "Who'd you put in jail today?" Or I'll go over cases, because I always like to advocate for people. I said, "Think on the other side." You know, of course, I'm the defense attorney.
Right.
So it's always good to have those different points of view, and perspective is everything. And when you bring that experience to the table, it's very useful. So thank you for your contribution today. We're going to move on and segue on to our next speaker, who we have Mr. Peter Dennis.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. This is a fantastic opportunity. I appreciate being able to be here and contribute.
Thank you. And so from what we understand, you are one of Lee County's own members of the board, or the bar. Which one? The board or the bar?
Well, the bar. Okay.
So thank you for being here today. And I wanted to start off, we had a chance to kind of talk behind the scenes, and guys, don't feel jealous, it's okay. So we've had a lot of conversation today. We've talked to our chief, we've talked to our president, we've seen people who are on the front lines, and our photographer. With you, what do you say to people who are hesitant to say anything to law enforcement or against them, like to speak out?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to look at why they might be hesitant to do so. You know, everybody has had a different experience, different life experiences, and those certainly can, you know, color the way that you interact in general, but especially how you may interact with law enforcement. I think a lot of people who may be hesitant to come forward and to engage with law enforcement do so not because they don't want to be helpful or because they don't want to contribute, but because of their past experience, they may not feel comfortable doing that. Now that doesn't say anything necessarily about any particular officer or department, These experiences may be cumulative over somebody's lifetime, but unless somebody is going to feel that they have that comfort and trust, I don't think that we can expect them to voluntarily engage with law enforcement. So again, I think it comes back to community trust, as well as we have to put things in context. We have to understand where people are coming from. I mean, we live in Robert E. Lee County, okay? And I was bused under court-ordered desegregation, which went on far longer. I don't know if it was late 90s or early O's, or I don't remember exactly when it was. We are a deeply segregated community. There isn't a lot of integration here. So, you know, we have to take all of that into account. It was interesting when we were talking, when I heard Mr. Godwin mention his aunts and whatnot, you know, until very recently here, you know, change didn't happen. So you don't have to go back too far. You look at somebody who's 50 or 60 years old, and they experience something. They experience something that we can't imagine today. So, you know, I think we have to be sensitive to the fact that we are in this situation, or we are in this community today, and it is shaped by the past. It is shaped by decisions that we have made, and we can't just take people out of that context and expect them, you know, to behave differently.
That's very powerful, to acknowledge that everything that's gone on right now or is going on is shaped by things that have happened in the past. And I think that's very important to note and for everybody to understand moving forward. And when I talked to you before, you told me that no question was off limits for you, right?
That's right.
Okay, I don't have any hard questions for you. I just wanted to make sure you were still there. With that being said, you mentioned trust. And how do you think that we can move as a community to a place of trust with law enforcement and vice versa? What do you think needs to happen where there is trust between the two entities or among the two entities?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question. I think probably the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that there is a gap in trust. I think we first have to acknowledge that it exists.
Okay.
Because we can't begin to address it, or we can't begin to try to figure out, you know, how we can build it if we don't acknowledge its existence. Secondly, we have to have increased interaction, neutral interaction. I'm not saying that there is, you know, necessarily overwhelmingly negative interaction. I think it's the opposite. I think
nonsense.
People have
Nonsense. No one gets it.
I can hold on a second. Ms. Lbaugh, are you able to?
We can hear you. At least I can.
We can hear you. You just need to unmute yourself.
We hear you.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Did somebody pop on your screen too? Or was it just me? Okay, good. We have to increase the presence. I think we have to ask, and I'm not saying that they're not doing this, but I think one way to increase trust are boots on the ground. You know, I mean, are seeing more officers that aren't in vehicles, more officers that may be able to interact directly because I think what you'll find is in most communities, people know where the problems are. People know who are the problems. And if that trust is there, then they're going to be willing to help make their community safer. Nobody wants to live in an unsafe community. I mean, that's the thing. Nobody wants to be scared to go home. Nobody wants to have, you know, people shot around them. Nobody wants that. So understanding that they don't want that, that people don't want that, trying to find a way that we can create more trust and understanding. I think that's extremely important. And I don't pretend to have all the answers.
Well, I'll stop you right there because you did offer a solution earlier that I'd like you to present to the group. And that was the take a look at the 8 can't wait. And I was vaguely familiar with it, but if you would like to at least do a brief introduction of that idea to this group today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't necessarily, I'm not endorsing this movement necessarily. I'm not saying that it is the solution to all the problems. It just seemed like a simple way to discuss some reforms that are happening around the country that, you know, at least you can frame a discussion about reforms that are happening around the country. It's taken from best practices of over 100 law enforcement agencies. It's been adopted by a number of large cities, but in fact, just yesterday, Columbus adopted all 8 of the recommendations. And these recommendations, again, they're just 8 of them, and it just helps start off a conversation. But the first one is banning chokeholds and strangleholds, that they have no place in policing. Secondly, to require warning before shooting. Certainly, I understand that may be controversial, and there may be law enforcement who say, well, yeah, that's great. We'd love to warn people, but we often don't have time to barely react. And I understand that. But the third would be a duty to intervene. And I think this is extremely important because as we saw in the video of George Floyd, we had officers who were standing by who were watching this. And I think one of the things that yeah, and this is a difficult thing to say, but I think one of the things that you see is, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, most of the times that you have people complaining about police conduct, it is not coming from inside the agency, or maybe we just don't hear about it, which I think is equally important. If an agency is policing itself, we should hear about it. But usually it's civilians. So having a duty to intervene, and if you don't, then there'll be consequences for doing so. To have a use of force continuum. Now that doesn't mean that everything fits within a graph that you know you can follow all those stages. But if you lay out a use of force continuum that says, listen, this is what we do first. These are the type of things that we do if we come up with somebody who's belligerent, or these are the type of weapon. And once it escalates up, or if you come to a place where it's already escalated up, then you know you have designations for things that should be used and things that should be done, because use of force is going to happen. The question is, you know, in what form? To require de-escalation. You know, the worst thing that we can see is in cases where sometimes in some places around the country, the addition of law enforcement can escalate a situation where I've seen many law enforcement officers be able to effectively de-escalate, turn down the heat, so that people have the ability to make rational decisions. To require all alternatives be exhausted before shooting. To ban shooting at moving vehicles. And finally, and I think this may be the most important recommendation of these 8 proposed, is to require comprehensive reporting. Now, comprehensive reporting, when I say that, I'm not saying reporting internally and keeping track. That's part of it. but I think that the community, in order to have that trust, needs to be able to see this reporting. They need to have transparency so they know what's happening within any agency. You know, because if you don't know, and all you hear are rumors, and all you see are negative things on television, you have nothing necessarily to go by to verify for yourself. So, you know, if we want to go back to building trust within a community, I think that definitely comprehensive, transparent reporting is a requirement.
Thank you. Now, we appreciate your contribution, Mr. Dennis, and just sharing your perspective, especially that that 8 can't wait. I think that's at least a good springboard to having more discussion about how to move forward and some actionable steps, because I'm all about don't just complain about it. What are we going to do moving forward? How do we fix this problem? I think that's why everybody on this call is here, because we don't just like to talk with action-oriented individuals. I think for you, I think I had one more discussion now, and I want to put it on hold because I want to circle back to Mr. Dennis. I want to circle back to Mr. Godwin because I have questions for both of you guys. But without further ado, I want to move forward and make sure we give this young lady, this doctor, enough respect to make sure that we hear her point of view, and she has some amazing things to contribute today. So let's move forward with the intention that at 5:20, I'm going to circle back to both of them so that we can get Chief back on the phone at about 5:25. Does that make sense to everybody? Can we all work with that? Perfect. Okay. Doc, will you unmute your phone so I can make sure I say your name right? I don't want to mispronounce it. Dr. Sandra?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm unmuted.
Okay, what is your last name? How do you pronounce it?
Very phonetic, Pavelka.
Dr. Pavelka, thank you so much for being here.
Looks, it's very easy.
Oh, you are, I was like, I'm gonna say doctor because I know what it takes to earn it. So thank you for being here with us today. And if you would, give us a little background. We already know you're president and CEO of Community and Restorative Justice Associates, but give us a little peek into what you do quickly, and then I want you to move forward because I want to ask you some questions.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today, and I really appreciate the Bar Association and the committee to sponsor this. Very timely and much needed. My work actually spans, it's hard to believe, over 25 years with regard to my work with restorative justice. And I started as a PhD student at Florida Atlantic University and oversaw was project administrator of the Balance and Restorative Justice Project. At the time, we were funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and we were working in communities and justice systems, states all across the country to develop and implement what at the time was, well, it's called restorative justice, but at the time it was really looked at as, oh my gosh, what are they doing now? What is this thing that they're talking about, restorative justice, which really goes back to indigenous times and the role of justice in the community, looking at really a brief description would be repairing harm caused by a crime or a wrongful occurrence, and really making amends through dialogue, through reparation, through restitution, etc. So that work was really, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, was very instrumental because we were doing work all across the country with justice systems who were looking to reform, looking to do something differently. And I'll tell you, that was an aha moment, one of those aha moments that Oprah talks about, you know, and that really was life-changing to me. And I've since continued that work, not only in my personal life, but my professional life. So I appreciate everyone sharing their stories today, and really wanted to talk with you all, if it's okay to kind of move on to just some questions. We talk about restorative justice and these opportunities to really look at justice and at our roles differently. I truly believe that we're at a pivotal time in this world. We're at a point where we're life is going to change, the world's going to change, just based on, I think, the incidents that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, and especially George Floyd. And it visibly shook me when I have experienced it through the media and seeing what happened to him and hearing the stories behind that. But since that time, I've had a time to actually reflect and think about what happened and how do we as a community come together and move forward. There's been talk about taking down, busts of Robert E. Lee. There's talk about changing the county name. Community on the East Coast where I lived, where my children were born and raised, Plantation, there's talks about changing the name of that community. So think about some of these questions that we want to pose. Who's been harmed? What harm has been caused? Where are we? Where do we want to go? How do we want our life to really look like at one point in time, now and in the future? So what is this path that we're on, and what do we really want it to, where do we want it to lead? Not only individually, but also collectively as a community, as a region, as society, and even as a world. So where are we going on this path? You all have raised some really great points today, but I think we have to look at this, certainly more comprehensively. And I really think that we have an opportunity to be able to heal many of these racial and social justice disparities that we're dealing with at this point in time, and that have really been in our face, if you would. We have no choice. I don't know if someone hasn't been shaken by the events of these last couple of weeks. I'm not sure that I really can't say, because I know I have. I know really just about all of my friends and colleagues I've spoken with have. So these are just some questions I think that are really important to raise and to think about. And then also, what is the path that we want to be on in terms of reconciliation, restoration, and moving forward to reform? So with those in mind, I want to pose this idea of restorative justice. Many of you in the community who are on the call today know about my work and know about what we've done in the educational systems locally and in the justice system and so forth, but there's so much more that we really need to look at. And it really starts too with the way we speak with one another, the way we interact with one another, if it's that simple, right, on those simple terms. And then looking at it on a continuum and comprehensively. The educational system, for example, I did training several years ago on restorative strategies in schools, which is one of the applications that we use for restorative justice. And that kind of took a back burner at one point. I spoke, mainly because of the Parkland fatalities, a shooting several years ago, and wanting to deal more with public safety. But the applications are really endless in terms of discipline, in terms of how we're actually dealing with these students, applying it to curriculum and other areas. And I'm also hoping, I think Chris is on the call in her new role as president-elect of the Florida School Board Association. Maybe she can also further that at the state level. That would be incredible. But so the application to the educational system, the application to many of the attorneys defense attorneys, prosecutors on the line today, to really think about how we can resolve disputes and mediate cases before we have to litigate them. How can we really look at justice differently in that regard? I mean, certainly there's a time and a place to litigate, but if we're able to mediate and resolve disputes early on, that is wonderful opportunity to do so. And then, of course, by means of additional diversion programs within not only our circuit, and I, as chair of the Juvenile Justice Board, I'm very proactive in advocating for additional diversion and intervention programs. And through the courts, through law enforcement, through correctional facilities, detention facilities as well. And then I also want to kind of put a plug in with for an area that I think is very much needed. And we received a grant last year from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, excuse me, with the Fort Myers Police Department. And I'm the principal evaluator on that grant. And we will be working with offenders who are re-entering the community and dealing with them comprehensively to address certain issues, such as getting them a job, something as simple as, you know, training, education. We're in partnership with Goodwill, partnership with workforce development, Solace Care, getting them mental health treatment, behavioral health treatment that they need. So really addressing these issues comprehensively. And we're looking forward to starting to get those cases and move forward with that. We just hired our coordinator actually this week, as a matter of fact. And then through restorative dialogue, and that's something certainly that the chief has really brought into, that he's going to talk about in a little bit. And we're going to move forward really on this path to bring the community together and have dialogue like we're having today, which is so important to hear about, you know, needing more boots on the ground, needing the, you know, having those officers out there. And, you know, I know that has been a priority for the chief. He's been very proactive with that, and I certainly commend him for that. And so moving forward then, I think too, the importance of not only having the conversation with us, but with our youth. And police youth dialogue, I've had a number of those where I facilitated them across the circuit here in Fort Myers with the Boys and Girls Club. We also have had some with the police department and Young Leos, which is a group that that one of our officers, Dominique, works with, and also Peace Center for Girls. So that's a way to really work with those youth, prevention, intervention, to hear what they have to say, and to really combine to law enforcement and how they're working with our youth, and really engage the law enforcement officers with our youth even more than they already have. So those are just a few of my thoughts. Thanks for engaging me today. But I think it's really important to just to end on the restorative dialogue and moving, having these type of sessions and continue them. So, you know, we have to continue, we can't be complacent. It's important to continue this dialogue and really, as opposed to, you know, again, being complacent, and to move to a point of action. And going back to some of those questions I said earlier, I was on my walk. Actually, I've been walking my dog a couple times a day during this this time, and the song came up on Pandora by John Lennon. Many of you know this, if not all of you, Imagine. And I thought, gosh, what a great song to just keep as kind of our ongoing theme, and thinking about, you know, being that dreamer, and let's kind of move together and change the world together. But more importantly, change our community to where we really want it to be and where it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, especially for your discussion of something very big. We talk about restorative justice, but you said something, restorative dialogue, excuse me. But you also said something in there. And I think I have a lot of comments, and I think we have to acknowledge this, and we all know this. And I hope everybody's a little uncomfortable today, because if you're not, then we are not. I haven't done my job yet, because that means we're not moving towards the middle. So if this conversation is a little uncomfortable and you disagree with some of it, good. You're not supposed to agree with everything today. But you talked about systematic, racial, and social disparities having a lot to do with injustice. And I think that's something that we did not point on. But every day we see this, especially as attorneys. We know those who have means seem to do better. Even in our system, they are treated better. Those who have affluence and you have the privilege, you seem to do better, whatever that privilege, whatever that advantage may be. And that also contributes to the systematic and racial social disparities that we have. And it's not just limited to our law enforcement. And I know someone said that, but that's what we're talking about today. It's not limited to that though. And so we're not gonna put it in a box, and we're not gonna say that law enforcement is the end all and be all of everything that's good or bad that has happened. And if we can disband or whatever everybody wants to do, then that will fix everything, because we can tear down every statue, we can disband the police force, but until we change the hearts of the people, until we move forward in a way, until we collectively decide that's not how we want to live, and that's not the kind of legacy we want to leave for those that come after us, then we're going to continue to have the same conversation over and over again. So thank you for that. Before we move forward, Mr. Godwin, are you here? If not, I can come back to you. Mr. Dennis said something in our discussions together, and I wanted to discuss it as a group and just to have a thought. Mr. Godwin, I'm going to come to you in just a minute. We were talking, and you said that we talked about trauma that happens from negative interactions with law enforcement. And you said something, I want everyone to hear what you said. He said that the world looked a lot different to me the next day. Can you please explain what that meant?
Yeah, you know, if you have, you know, if you've had a negative experience with law enforcement, your whole perception of where you feel safe, of what you can do, changes, because ultimately, you know, in your mind you imagine that you know, no matter what happens, that there are people there who are going to protect you. If you have a traumatizing experience or a bad experience with law enforcement, everything looks different. You may not want to venture out of your house very much. You may not feel comfortable being, you know, in large groups. You may, but it's very personal too. It's also a very personal thing that if that trust of the organization that you count on to be there for you, if that's broken, it's very hard to rebuild. And I think as we look into a lot of communities where we see this, I think it's so important to understand that the trauma that they go under, just as Mr. Godwin said, the trauma that they feel is not just that moment. It's not just momentarily. It stays with you. It stays with you and colors everything that you do from that day forward. Now, you know, you can use that positively. There are ways in which you can try to channel that, but you're not going to forget it. And that's why it's so important that we reduce the number of negative interactions, but that we also recognize that when they do happen, it is trauma. It is trauma and it hurts. And there's real pain that people are feeling today that is causing them to go out. This isn't coming from people just saying, I got nothing else to do, let me go protest. There is real pain inside of people that they're feeling. I know that pain.
Yes, and I appreciate you, because he's speaking from a personal aspect, and I hope that we receive what he's saying in a way of understanding his perspective. So thank you, Attorney Dennis, for allowing us that insight into just a very personal aspect of who you are, in the effort to show us how much it does affect people and why it's so important for us all to care about this cause. Thank you very much. Mr. Godwin, you had, I wanted to follow up with you. We got in the sake of time, I did want to ask you though, what do you say to people who say that racism is not widespread?
When it comes to that question, I've heard it a lot and I hear it a lot. And I think we all hear that question. Well, it's really not that bad, right? And so I always pose the question in the other way. Imagine if you were talking to your spouse and you asked your spouse, hey, are you cheating on me? And their response is, well, not widespread cheating. Like by saying that, did that make you feel any better? No, you know that they're still cheating, right? That's the same concept that you're dealing with when you're talking about widespread or not widespread. I think the question in itself is useless, because at that point, by saying that, you have now agreed that racism exists in the country. You want to argue about how large it is. And I like to, point to examples like Dylan Roof. It only takes one racist to kill, 9 Black people in a church. And I know a lot of times that we spend a lot of times talking about law enforcement, but when you have things like the Derek Chafkin kneeling on George Floyd's throat, that's not a police officer. That's a racist who puts on a police uniform. And I think a lot of people have to be privy to that, to understand that, racism is a thing in this world. Whether it's 5 or 500, you have already answered your question by stating, hey, yes, there's racism that goes on, but I don't think it's that bad. To every individual that has to experience it, I don't think they look at it the same way. And I know we were just talking about the concept of systematic racism, which is a thing, right? I mean, one of the greatest examples I see of that is a historical figure, Lee Atwater, who says, we're not going to say the N-word anymore. We'll just say busing and states' rights, right? And so he used those words to say, that's how we'll make it seem like, that racism isn't widespread, is that we'll use it in different ways. We'll say different things, but it's still in front of everyone. And unless individuals decide to do something when it's uncomfortable, so when you have that best friend that is saying something that is not quite what you would consider an anti-racist to say, or you have that law enforcement officer buddy that is assessing a situation in a way you think is racist, unless you're willing to be like, hey, no, that's not what we're going to do, that widespread or not widespread racism will still be there.
Thank you, Mr. Godwin. So, I appreciate everyone, and I hate to have to segue into another discussion, but there are so many passionate point of views and perspectives that I'm glad were brought to the table today. And I really thank you guys for tuning in. I see that everybody's like really active. I see the heads nodding. I wanted to say hi to Henry Lee Paul, who was my hero and partner in crime back at the Florida bar. I see him in the pictures as well. So thank you guys for joining. But before we leave, we're going to allow our Chief of Police to come back on the line. Sir, where are you? Chief Diggs?
I'm right here.
Are you? Now, I wanted to ask you something, because I heard that there, as we move forward, and you said some of the initiatives are moving forward, I would like to be a part of that. I want to come down to Lee County. I feel like I'm the daughter of Lee County now. So I want to come down. I want to see this thing move forward. So you make sure you invite me. I'm coming, okay?
I got your name on the list right now.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I wanted to go ahead and allow you to add whatever you like to add. And one thing that we need to know is I like to ask the hard questions, and I like to dig in. But what we need to know about you is that in the community of policing overall around the nation, you were one of the first ones to stand up and say, you know what, this act against George Floyd is not right. It was not right. And those people who committed that act should be held responsible. And in law enforcement, and I can tell you this from a personal perspective, and you can agree or not if you choose, to stand out and to say something like that can sometimes ostracize you. And so I thank you for doing that, because that does call that exercise of bravery and standing up for the right thing at the right time. Sometimes does not go applauded as it should. So thank you, Chief Diggs. So anything you want to add today, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Number one, this is good. And I have to admit, when Kelly first started talking about this and inviting me, and her partner there, Dr. P, I had my reservations. Is I know how Dr. P can be, and I'm starting to learn how Kelly's starting to be. But you know, for everyone that's listening, dialogue is good. It's good to hear what folks have to say. You know, I said before, I've been in this business for a long time, and I can tell you how this nation has been unsettled when it comes to the actions of some stupid policemen numerous times. But dialogue is very good, and this is something that is good to hear, because as public servants, we need to hear how members of the community feel. And the comments that Mr. Dennis talked about resonates very well with me and with others. So this is good. And I think one of the things that we need to continue to do is to continue this dialogue. And because it's good, it's healthy, and it helps. Because the bottom line is, no matter how you feel about the police department or police officers, you know, we're here to serve and protect you. I always have a saying: Saeed pays the checks, but the citizens of this community are our bosses. So we need to hear them. We need to be able to listen to them. Number two, segueing off of one of the comments Mr. Dennis has, and I want to repeat that. He talked about those 8 recommendations. We've been doing those 8 recommendations on this police department for over 4 years. And so, you know, like I said before, they're good recommendations. They're a part of our policy, and we've been doing them for 4 years. Ken Fay, I hear you as far as your comments about why aren't we trying to hire more police officers from the community and that's going to live in the community. We're working very hard to do that. And in some cases, we've been successful. In some cases, we're not as successful as I would like to be. But that doesn't mean we're going to give up on doing that. And that's one of the reasons why we have that Pathways Policing initiative that we're started, and we're going to continue to work in that. Additionally to that, we're going to continue to try to recruit individuals who are from some of the marginal communities in the city of Fort Myers and try to get them to be police officers, because you're absolutely right. You know, it's different when you're a police officer from the community and you're living in the community. And so we're working very hard to do that. But that's not something that's going to be accomplished very quickly. That's going to take some time. Finally, I'm going to segue back to Ms. Williams about getting involved, because now you open yourself up. I got your number.
Absolutely, call me.
One
You better ask somebody. I'm coming.
I'm going to, not only for you, but for anyone that's listening. We have a grant called Project Safe Neighborhoods. And part of that grant is to develop a task force. And that task force has to be made up with not only criminal justice partners, but communities as well, because we want input from the community as we start to do various things to make this community safe. And part of that Project Safe Neighborhood Task Force responsibility is to once again try to fill in the gaps to improve police community relations in this community. So we got the grant. We put in for a second one. We got a second one that's coming down the road. But if you want to talk about how the community can get involved, consider being a part of this task force. We'll work with community leaders, outreach group leaders, criminal justice leaders to do the things we need to improve police community relations, and in turn, working together with the community, make this city a better and safer city to live in. And at that, I'll just give back to you.
Thank you, Chief. What an awesome initiative. I feel like you saved it to drop the mic at the end on me. I don't even know what to say after that. So thank you for that initiative with the community input task force that are there to fill in the gaps. We appreciate that. And I thank all my The panelists, you guys did an amazing job. Chief, Mr. Godwin, Mr. Dennis, Mr. Kempe Morotai, and Dr. Pavelka. I'm not going to mispronounce it. Thank you guys for coming today. I'm very conscious of everyone's time, but I will say thank you everyone for logging on today. And like I said, we were all here for one cause because we care. We want to move forward. We want to see something happen. And I think some of the things we got from this is hold those around us accountable, hold ourselves accountable, and don't just and continue the conversation. Are a few of the things I heard today that we can continue to do. We can't be afraid to have these hard conversations. And if you need help, call me. I'm happy to facilitate. But more than that, I tell my attorneys, I tell anybody I talk to, continue to carry yourselves with the highest in the highest regard, because you never know. You may be the only justice someone ever knows. You are the line in between justice and injustice for people, and the jobs that we do every day are very important, whatever kind of law you're in, because we are helping preserve constitutional rights no matter where you are. So I hope everybody takes their job seriously, but also know that we, with the benefits, we also have a burden of, sometimes being in uncomfortable spots. And I commend everyone for being here today and being willing to learn more. And I will not ramble on. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to host this, and thank the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the LCBA, the president, Kelly, and all of the other individuals involved. Thank my boss, E, give her an email, thank her for allowing me to do this and calling on me. And it's always a blessing when your name is mentioned in rooms that you aren't even in. So thank you guys for having me. I wish you guys the best, and have a good evening.